The next speaker is Frédéric Bourgeois from Paris, and he will talk about chief quantization of a mental legendarians and contact homology.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be back again in Rio, and especially with these nice activities organized for us. So what I'm going to talk about today is a joint work in progress with Claude Viterbo. Now I know that the title of this talk is a little bit barbaric, but I'll try to convey what is going on. So let me start by an introduction that describes the scenery and in order to demystify a little bit the title. I'm going to work in a specific contact manifold here, namely the one-jet space of a manifold. So I'll start with M, a general manifold, and consider its one-jet space, J1 of M, which is the cotangent bundle of M multiplied by the real line. And that's a contact manifold because it is equipped with a canonical contact structure, which is the kernel of a one-form alpha, where alpha is constructed naturally from the coordinates that you have here. So let me denote by z the coordinate in the R factor, by x some local coordinates in the manifold M, and by y the coordinates in the cotangent fibers of T star M. And so you can write the contact form dz minus y dx, right? Y dx is the canonical Liouville one form on T star M. Okay, so you have a contact manifold there. And what I would like to do is to study some Legendrian submanifolds in this one-jet space equipped with its contact structure. So I'm going to study these submanifolds and assume that all these submanifolds are closed and oriented. Right, and so let me just remind you that Legendrian means that these submanifolds are tangent to the contact structure and have the maximal dimension for which this is possible, namely 1/2 of the dimension of the contact distribution. So if you want to represent graphically or draw a picture of such a Legendrian submanifold, it is convenient to use the front projection, right, which projects the total contact manifold J1 of M to the zero jet space of M, which is just the product of M with the real line. So you forget, in other words, the y coordinate. And this y coordinate you can always recover. So if you have a Legendrian submanifold and you project it down there, from its front projection you can always recover the original contact Legendrian submanifold here by restoring y. And restoring y you can do because you know that you are in the kernel of this one form. You can go back along a Legendrian front by setting that y is going to be the derivative of the z coordinate with respect to the x coordinates, right? So you don't lose any information when you do that, and drawing pictures in this front projection is easier because you have less dimensions and it's more convenient to represent these Legendrian submanifolds. Now, if you want to study these Legendrian submanifolds modulo Legendrian isotopy, you need some invariants to distinguish Legendrian isotopic classes, and there are different types of techniques or tools that are available to do that. One of these techniques is well known and been discussed already in this workshop is the use of holomorphic curves. And more specifically in this context, what you can construct using holomorphic curves is the so-called Legendrian contact homology. Right, I will define it in a minute. It's a homological invariant with a differential counting holomorphic curves. Now, this object is relatively complicated because it is graded non-commutative algebra. So you may want to produce an object which is easier to study, such as a graded vector space. And in order to do that, you are led to introduce another object in homological algebra, which is so-called augmentation. Right. So this contact homology you can think of, in some sense, as some infinite dimensional version of Morse theory for the action functional. And you might wonder whether there is a possible finite dimensional reduction of this process, and the answer turns out to be yes, because Legendrian submanifolds, or at least large classes of Legendrian submanifolds, can be described through generating families. Which are functions defined on our original manifold M, but that depend on some extra parameters. I'll denote this by R capital N. And these functions can be used to describe some classes of Legendrian submanifolds. So what you do basically is that you take the one jet of this function, first ignore these extra parameters. Right? So you have coordinate x in M. The coordinate y, as suggested in this reconstruction from the front projection, is going to be the derivative of f with respect to x, and the z coordinate is going to be the value of function f. Right? So this way you would simply get the one jet of f. That's just a graphical Legendrian submanifold. And to get more general objects, you introduce these extra parameters. Let me call them E for extra. And you are just going to look at this one jet along the critical locus. That is the locus where the derivative with respect to E vanishes. Right? And so you get a description of many Legendrian submanifolds that way, using just one function or one family of functions, if you like. And not only you can get a description of these things, but you can also, using Morse theory, that it's used on some other function constructed via f, construct some homological invariant called generating family homology. Right, so that's the second approach. And then more recently, some tools from another field were imported into symplectic topology. So that's the use of some tools for microlocal analysis. More specifically, the objects that are being used here are complexes of sheaves. And the relation between these complexes of sheaves and Legendrian submanifolds is that the so-called singular support of these complexes of sheaves, that's what I'm writing, that is F star, coincides with the Legendrian submanifold. Now, this singular support, basically, I'm going to detail that a little later, basically tells you where in the manifold under consideration, this complex of sheaves and its homology is going to vary. Right? Everywhere else, it's basically going to be locally constant. And from this more algebraic description of Legendrian submanifold, you can also construct some invariants by taking the cohomology of this complex of sheaves. You get a differential that is constructed both from the differential for the usual sheaf cohomology and built also from the differential of the complexes that we have there. Right? So you get three different things, and conjecturally, these approaches should be equivalent, so there should be relations between all of these things. Now, as I said, this micro-local analysis is the more recent technique in the study of Legendre submanifold. So the relation between these tools and symplectic topology first appears in the work of Tamarkin. It was then made more precise by Guillermo, Kashiwara, and Shapira. Then Nadler and Zaslow showed the relation between such objects and Fukaya categories in symplectic topology. It was Guillermo who first showed that in the case of symplectic geometry, where you study Lagrangian submanifolds instead of Legendrian submanifolds, one can associate such a complex of sheaves to an exact Lagrangian submanifold in a cotangent bundle of a manifold. So that was some kind of connection of this nature, but at the level of symplectic topology. And after that, Viterbo did something similar, also constructed a complex of sheaves for an exact Lagrangian submanifold, but this construction, unlike Guillermo's construction, was based on Floer homology. And so that was really a connection between the world of holomorphic curves and this world of micro-local analysis. And so, as you can guess, I'm indeed more interested today in this connection between holomorphic curves and sheaves. Now, in the specific situation here of Legendrian submanifolds, such a relation was made precise in dimension 3 by Ng, Rutherford, Shende, Sivek, and Zaslow. But their work is of combinatorial nature and limited to dimension 3. And so what I would like to describe today is some connection going from holomorphic curves to micro-local analysis, but which is not limited to dimension 3. So more precisely, the main result I would like to discuss is the following. There exists an A-infinity functor from a category that I call the category of augmented Legendrians, aug L, or L aug, on J1 of M, to the derived category of M times R. So that's a category that lives here. So that for an object here, so which is a Legendrian submanifold equipped with an augmentation, epsilon, you associate a complex of sheaves, and this functor has the property that the singular support of the resulting complex of sheaves will intersect the 1-jet space of M exactly along the original Legendrian submanifolds. And in addition, you have some correspondence between homological invariants that can be constructed on each side. That is, some Legendrian contact homology, but here I'm putting the star up, it's going to be cohomology in this context, with respect to a pair of augmentations, epsilon 1 and epsilon 2, for a pair of Legendrian submanifolds, lambda 1 and lambda 2, is going to be isomorphic to the cohomology over the manifold M times R, so over which the sheaves are defined, of some derived homomorphisms variant of them associated to the two complexes of sheaves corresponding to the two Legendrian submanifolds with their augmentations. So that's the precise statement I would like to discuss, but I'm going to define all these symbols now. So first, let me talk more precisely about the holomorphic curve size here, and more precisely, therefore, about Legendrian contact homology. So the first step is to construct the so-called Chekhanov-Eliashberg differential graded algebra, DGA in short. So you start first with an algebra, so that's script A. It's going to be the free unital non-commutative algebra, which is generated by the wave chords of our Legendrian submanifold lambda. So here, the wave chords, in view of this choice of contact form, the wave vector field is just the vector field pointing along the d over dz direction, right? And wave chords are just pieces of integral curves with endpoints lying on the Legendrian submanifold. So these are easy to determine from the data of the Legendrian submanifolds. And each wave chord will be given a grading, because it's a graded algebra, which is graded by the Conley-Zehnder index, which is a variant of the construction that was discussed already in this conference, except that you don't have a closed wave orbit or a closed Hamiltonian trajectory, but something that is just an interval. And second, we'll consider a differential on this algebra, which is going to be a linear map. It's going to be a derivation. It's going to have degree -1 and act on the algebra. And in view of all these properties, in order to specify it, it's enough to say what it does to a single generator of the algebra. So A will be a wave chord. The effect will be obtained by summing over collections B1 to BR of wave chords. Then comes the coefficient. I forgot to mention, for simplicity, the algebra is going to be defined over the field Z2. So coefficients are going to be 0 or 1. And so these coefficients are going to be the count modulo 2 of elements in some moduli space of holomorphic disks having their boundary on the Legendrian submanifolds and asymptotic on one side to the chord A which is given, and on the other side to the collection of chords B1 to BR that I'm summing over. These holomorphic disks will live in the symplectization of the one-jet space, which has some which is invariant on a translation, and so we need to quotient the moduli space by this vertical translation. And then after you place this coefficient, you multiply this coefficient by generators of A, and we are going to multiply by the product of these chords on the bottom, B1, etc., to BR. So that defines a differential, and so this Legendrian contact homology is based on this pair AD. I'm sorry? Oh, it's essentially, yes, for exposition purposes, I'm making things as simple as possible. Then with these properties, so this construction was made in the case of 100 space is explicit by Ecole, Metnayer, and Sullivan, and they show that the square of this differential is equal to 0, and that the homology of this AD, which is denoted LCH of lambda, is invariant under Legendrian isotopy. But being the homology of this differential graded algebra, it's still graded algebra, it's non-commutative. It may be very difficult to compute just for algebraic reasons, not to mention the fact that you have to count holomorphic curves, so it's difficult to handle. And so to simplify this invariant, it is convenient to introduce the notion of an augmentation, which is just an algebraic gadget in this context of homological algebra. So we say that an augmentation, I'll denote by the letter epsilon, of our differential graded algebra AD, it's a DGA map from our differential graded algebra to the simplest differential graded algebra that you can imagine over Z2, namely Z2 itself equipped with the zero differential. Right? So this means that 1 must be mapped to 1 because all the objects here are unital, that D followed by epsilon must be equal to 0, the grading is preserved, it's linear, it's multiplicative. Right? So that's an augmentation, it's a very classical thing in homological algebra, and it can be used to linearize the construction that's over there on the far right. And you can indeed construct a linearized complex out of that. So you replace A, which is an algebra, by C, which is a vector space. So that's the graded, the same grading as before, vector space over the field Z2. Again, it could be a module of a more complicated ring, but I'm simplifying here. Generated by the same guys, namely by the wave chords of lambda. And this will be equipped with a differential which is simpler than the one on the right side. It will be called the linearized differential. So I decorate the old name by an epsilon to say it's a linearized object. And when acting on a chord, what you get is originally the same expression as the original differential. You sum over a collection of chords. You count modulo 2 elements in some moduli space of holomorphic disks. But then you don't want to keep a product of generators because you have only linear combinations now. So you sum over the R factors. And all of these factors except the J's one, you are going to kill using the augmentation. So you apply the augmentation to the first one, etc., to the J minus 1 generator. Bj you keep alive, and then the ones after it you also destroy using the augmentation. Rather, you replace by some coefficient, which is again in Z2, like here. And it turns out that this is an appropriate construction in the sense that this is a differential and it has good properties. So this d epsilon, when we square it, you get 0. So you can consider the homology of this chain complex, and this is called the Legendrian contact homology linearized with respect to epsilon of lambda. And this object also has some invariance property, namely if you take all these homologies for all augmentations of our differential graded algebra there, this is again invariant under Legendrian isotopy. Right, so that's a great help to have this simpler object. But now you can play the same game, but instead of having one augmentation, you can use two augmentations. And for that reason, we call this bilinearized complex. So now you have two augmentations where they decorate with two objects. And the way to introduce a second guy is to notice that these generators come in some order, the order matters, and so you have those that come before and those that come after the generator you keep alive, and so you use the first augmentation before and the second augmentation after. And there you go, you get a differential depending on two objects, and it also has same type of properties. You get some homology, and the collection of all these homologies for all pairs of augmentations is again a Legendrian isotopy invariant. And not only this is a nice and simpler homological invariant, but jointly with Baptiste-Chantraine, we showed that one could use this construction to create a category, a so-called augmentation category, called aug of lambda, so that the objects are augmentations and the morphisms are going to be morphisms between two augmentations are going to be given by the chain complexes associated to these two augmentations. So you take C star and you take this differential. Now this is homology, and for some reason, due to some extra algebraic structures, it is more convenient to pass in cohomology. So instead of writing D for the differential, I write some mu with epsilon 1, epsilon 2 at the bottom. So that's the dual of the differential. This guy increases degree by 1, and it eats one chord. So I'm putting a 1 here to remember that. And then there are some higher operations that you can introduce on this complex that count holomorphic curves with more arguments. And this extra structure makes this not into an ordinary category, but into an A infinity category, because these morphism spaces have some extra structure that satisfies some A infinity relations. All right, so that's the way to package all the information coming from holomorphic curves. Now, in this context, I don't want to limit myself to a single Legendrian submanifold. I'm sorry? No, it's part of the choices you have to make in order to construct these complexes. So if you change the complex structure, you get quasi-isomorphic complex to this one. Yeah, I'm sweeping that under the rug, otherwise it would be too complicated to discuss all this. So if I don't want to limit myself to a single Legendrian submanifold, you can get this kind of extended version where you let the Legendrian submanifold vary freely, and that's how you get this L aug of J1 of M that was in the statement of the main result. The only difference is that here the objects are pairs of Legendrian submanifolds and augmentations for its Chekhov-Eliashberg-Gigi. Right, and so here you let lambda vary over all Legendrian submanifolds in J1 of M. So you really should think of this object as the contact counterpart of a Fukaya category in symplectic geometry, right? Except that you would consider a Fukaya category with Lagrangians that go to infinity, that are asymptotically cylindrical over Legendrian submanifolds. So here I just specify the asymptotic condition of these Lagrangians. But instead of, given this asymptotic condition of giving myself a Lagrangian filling of lambda, I give myself the algebraic counterpart of that, which is an augmentation somehow. And it's kind of more general, and it also does not depend on any data of symplectic nature, but only on the contact geometry here. Right? So that's exactly the contact geometric counterpart of a Fukaya category. It's also an infinity category, like the original Fukaya category. All right, so that's for the holomorphic curve side. Now, what about complexes of sheaves? So I introduced in the statement this barbaric dB of m times r. So what is this? It's also some kind of category. It's actually simpler than an infinity category. It's just a DG category. I'm going to explain that in a second. Of bounded, that's what the letter B stands for, bounded complexes of sheaves. And these sheaves associate to every open set in the manifold M times R some Z2 module. So these are sheaves of Z2 modules. On this manifold, M times R. And it's called derived category, that's for the letter capital D, because these things are considered, because in this category, the quasi-isomorphisms are considered as invertible maps. Quasi-isomorph. So you artificially or algebraically introduce inverses for quasi-isomorphisms, which is a natural thing to do because indeed these things depend on choices, but the dependence is only modulo quasi-isomorphism. And similarly in this world as well. So, okay, so that you get this category. Now the morphism spaces have some extra structure and hence this word DG. So basically the morphism spaces will be like DGAs, right? Differential graded algebras. Algebra because you can multiply things, you can compose morphisms like in any category. Graded because morphisms are going to be linear maps between complexes. And the grading tells you how to shift the grading between the original and the goal complex. And differential, because it inhabits the space of linear maps between complexes, inhabits a differential from the differential of the complexes. Namely, you take the commutator of the linear map with the differential before and after, right, on the two complexes. And so you get very naturally this algebraic structure. So that's exactly the type of objects considered here. And the additional ingredient that really makes the link somehow to contact topology was introduced by Kashiwara and Shapira, is the notion of singular support associated to such a complex of sheaves. So that's SS of some complex of sheaf F star, that this object will live in the cotangent bundle of the manifold M times R where the sheaves are defined, and it basically measures where this complex of sheaves is going to vary, or rather when its cohomology is going to change in some degree. So, of course, it depends where you are, but also if, M times R is exactly the space where the front projection of lambda is living. So imagine you have your Legendrian submanifold, that's the front projection of a Legendrian submanifold. Away from this lambda, locally when you move, the complex of sheaf is not changing somehow. And it's only going to change when you cross the front projection of lambda. That's what it means that when you say that the singular support is equal to lambda. And basically, what is going to happen is that if you are here and you move in a direction normal to the Legendrian submanifold, then you are going to change your complex because you're moving from one side to the other side. And so that's what was the idea of Kashiwa and Shapira, is to introduce these directions, somehow that measure that vary only in certain direction. If you move tangentially, you're not going to change anything to your complex of sheaves. And so this normal direction is equivalent to the data of the tangent hyperplane, which is exactly what is missing when you want to recover from the front of a Legendrian submanifold the entire Legendrian submanifold. And so if you remember where you are and which tangent direction you have to cross in order to change the values of the cohomology of your complex, you land in this cotangent bundle, and it makes sense to ask that these singular supports coincide with a Legendrian submanifold at infinity of this space. Right? And so that's in a nutshell the intuition behind what is the singular support for these complexes of sheaves. Now, out of these objects, you can, instead of taking this entire DG category, which consists of many types of objects, you can look at a subcategory called C1 of M lambda, where the lambda means that the singular support is equal to the cone over lambda in T star of M times R, plus some part of the zeroth section in this cotangent bundle. Right? So that's just a condition saying that these complexes of sheaves describe in some way a given Legendrian submanifold, lambda. And the one here just means that whenever you go across this Legendrian submanifold and you change the cohomology of these complexes of sheaves, you do that only by rank 1, so the minimal amount of change. Right? So these are intuitively changes by rank 1. And so that's the meaning of this little 1 here. And finally, you also ask that these complexes vanish identically if the z coordinate is very small. So basically, far below the Legendrian submanifold, you have trivial complex, and then things will get more complicated as you go up in the front projection M times R. And in this context, it was proved by Ng, Rutherford, Shende, Sivek, and Zaslow that for any Legendrian submanifold in R3, so that's just the one-jet space of the real line, there is an A infinity equivalence of categories from the augmentation category that I discussed, except that they work with a slight variant of the one I introduced, which is a unital version of aug, but never mind that if you don't know what that means, to this subcategory here, C1 of M lambda. Right? So it means really that all the data encapsulated here is equivalent to data encapsulated there. Right? And so you have an equivalence between these two worlds of these holomorphic curves and sheaves, but their result is limited to dimension 3 because it's combinatorial in nature. Basically what they do is that they cut the Legendrian submanifold into some elementary slices, and then for each elementary slice, well, they show that the data glues back nicely when you do that. But then for each elementary slice, they compute these categories on each side, and they check that the answers are the same. Right? So it doesn't really give you an insight about why this should be true in more generality, and and where this functor actually comes from. And it's just a comparison here, not really the construction of a functor using some geometry considerations. All right, so what I would like to do now is to explain, finally, how it is possible to give a geometric construction of such a functor in any dimension, thanks to previous work of Claude Viterbo. So what he did is something in the symplectic situation. If you have L an exact Lagrangian submanifold in the cotangent bundle of manifold M, he associates to that a complex of sheaves F sub L, so F depending on L, which lives in the derived category of bounded complexes of sheaves over M times R, such that the singular support of this FL is equal to basically the conification of L. Right? L lives in T star M. Here we have we are going to be in cotangent bundle of this. There are two extra dimensions. One dimension is the fact that an exact Lagrangian submanifold lifts to a Legendrian submanifold. Right? If you are in T star M, you can, using the primitive of the Liouville-1 form, you can lift this to T star M times R, which is our 1-jet space. And then you can take the cone over that, the symplectization of this, and you get symplectization of this lives in this cotangent bundle here, and so you get the fact that this singular support is exactly given by the object in this data, taking into account that the fact that this is exact that we started with. Right, so that's the idea is to turn this correspondence into a construction that itself will lead to an A infinity functor going from here to there, right? So here the result of Claude Viterbo is about objects, and there are no categories specifically in this statement, but I would like to explain how to make a construction which will turn into some A infinity functor. And so the idea of these constructions goes as follows. So our task is, given a Legendrian submanifold, given an augmentation, we need to construct a complex of sheaves. Now, to unwrap the notion of sheaves means that given U an open set in the manifold M times R over which the sheaves are defined, you need to construct a complex. Conification. All right, so how to get a complex out of this data? Well, the idea is that if you look at open set U, so I can look at a point in U, so that since I'm in M times R, this is the space where the front projection lives. I have coordinates X in M and Z in R, so I have a pair XZ in U, so that's a point. And this point, I can think of it, it's a point in my front projection, so let's say that the front projection of lambda is here. I have a point, let's say here. This point I can view as a Legendrian submanifold. It's just a projection of the fiber that lives above it to this point. So I just consider associated to this point comes a Legendrian submanifold. This is a very kind of degenerate front projection, right? Just a front, which just a point. So it's lambda of xz, right? The Legendrian submanifold corresponding to point xz is simply going to be the cotangent fiber of M above point x times the point z. That's Legendrian. And now what we have, in fact, is a family of Legendrian submanifolds plus another one with an augmentation. And we need to construct a complex. So let's play with Legendrian contact homology and construct such a thing. That's exactly the idea, is to construct an invariant, a homological invariant, for a family of pairs of augmented Legendrian submanifolds. So I have a pair of Legendrian submanifolds, so I consider a family version of the action functional and this action functional is going to be defined on the space of path going from our given Legendrian submanifold lambda to an element of our family lambda xz. Right? Now, and you want to do more theory with that to construct one homological invariant. That's, in a nutshell, the idea. Now, the difficulty with that is that you don't want your space of paths to depend on the point in the family. That's not nice. You want a single space and be done with it. So let's replace this by some base point, fixed base point x naught z naught. And instead of moving the Legendrian, let's introduce some Hamiltonian function on our 1-jet space that depends on our family, U, so that the effect of the corresponding Hamiltonian diffeomorphism in this contact geometric setup will move our base point, or rather our Legendrian above the base point, to a general element of our family, xz, corresponding to the xz in here, right? So you get, in fact, you can think of it as a family of Hamiltonians, so that this is moved to all the elements in the family here. And so when you do that, you have a single space, which is a path from two fixed Legendrian submanifolds, and you want to do more theory for some action functional, which depends on a path, so that the path is gamma. That depends on an element in U, that's a pair xz. So I'm writing down the usual action functional, which is integrating over the path the contact form. And then I need, as usual, to add the Hamiltonian term, because there is a Hamiltonian here, which is the integral along this path, so parameterized by interval 0, 1, of the Hamiltonian function along this path at point xz. And so, once you write this, you can formally write down what are going to be critical points, Gradient trajectories, and so on. And you can build up some theory, which is some variant of Legendrian contact homology, but in fact very close to the one I defined previously here. And this way, what you get is a single complex associated to a family of a geometric object, a family of Legendrian submanifolds. And the differential of this complex will count formal gradient trajectories of this action functional, and these are pairs, because you live both in J1 of M and in U, counting pairs of objects. So on the one hand, you have objects which are strips, right? So that's the parameter space for the path, you multiply by this real line for gradient trajectory, going to the symplectization of G1 of M, right? So this guy is like a Floer strip, Floer trajectory, and another component, let me call it lambda, defined on the real line, and taking values in U, which is kind of a gradient trajectory in the usual sense, in this manifold here. Except that, so these satisfy a Floer and Morse equation, except that they are interdependent, because this Floer equation depends on lambda, and this gradient equation for lambda depends on u, because via this, the fact that u will appear here. And so you get something that basically you cannot solve in practice, but in theory you get a complex out of that. And so if I represent graphically what you have, you get a strip, and in parallel you get a line, and points here at the same height. If you write down the equation, they are interdependent. Right? Now, for the strip, there are two boundary components for the strip. One boundary component corresponds to the fact that you start on lambda, so all these boundaries mapped to lambda, and the other one is mapped to the base point, lambda x naught z naught. Now, if you look at moduli spaces like this, you need to compactify moduli spaces. How can this break? Well, of course, it can break by vertical splitting, but if you have a whipcord on one of these two things, you can also have a splitting of some bubble on the side, if you like. This can happen here in lambda because they are chords, but we are given an augmentation, and augmentations, as I showed you, can basically kill wave chords, and so you can take care of bubbling here using this augmentation. And on this side, well, on this side, what you have is just a fiber. The wave direction is going that way, so there are no wave chords. So nothing can happen. You don't need an augmentation on this side. And so, thanks to this observation, you see that you get a differential that squares to 0, and you get indeed a complex, and leading to a family complex. We call it LCC, wide complex and not homology, for family U and augmentation epsilon associated to a Legendre submanifold lambda. Right? So it's a family version of the one I introduced before. Okay, so that's going to be intuitively a candidate for the complex we want in our construction. Now, the problem is that this complex has two defects. The first defect is that this thing does not even, if I associate to U this complex, does not even define a pre-sheaf, because you know, in an axiom for a sheaf, you need to be able to restrict from U to V, and then V to W, and then the composition of the two restrictions should coincide with the restriction here. The problem is that this is not going to work, because the construction of such things involves choices, which I hid under the rug, but Mihai reminded you that indeed you need to choose things like complex structure. You also need to choose a perturbation of this Hamiltonian function, in fact, which I didn't discuss at all here. And these choices will differ, so that in practice, the composition of the two restrictions will not coincide on the nose with the restriction directly from U to W, but only they will give quasi-isomorphic complexes. But they need to coincide on the nose to be a pre-sheaf. That's the definition of a pre-sheaf. And so in order to do that, you need to apply a so-called rectification procedure, which was described by Viterbo in his work, because he encounters exactly the same difficulty. And so his method of rectification to turn Floer complexes into these sheaves here can be applied exactly in the same way to solve this difficulty. Then you get a pre-sheaf, and you simply sheafify to get a sheaf out of this. And so that's how you get the appropriate correspondence at the level of objects between an augmentation category or its extended version to the derived category of on M times R. Right? So that's the idea. Then the nice thing about this construction is that once you have this, it is very natural to check that this correspondence at the level of objects extends nicely to morphisms, so that you really have a functor and not just a correspondence of objects. And so just to illustrate this, let me explain to you how you can associate to a morphism in the augmentation category a morphism in the derived category. So if you start with a morphism in the augmentation category, it means that you have a cochain in the bilinearized complex. So that's LCC epsilon 1, epsilon 2 of lambda 1, lambda 2. Right? That's morphisms in the augmentation category. And out of this, what you would like to construct is a linear map between the sheaves over every open set U. So basically, so the complexes are here. That's LCC U epsilon 2, lambda 2, to LCC star U epsilon 1, lambda 1. You want to construct a linear map like this. And how do you do that? Well, you count some holomorphic curves. And I'm going to do a picture like I drew here to explain what the object will look like, because the equation is, again, some Floer-Morse interdependent pair of equations. It's a strip as before, except that now this strip has an extra puncture here in the middle, which is constrained to map to this cochain C. C is a linear combination of wave chords, so it's asymptotes for punctures. And so the top part here of the boundary maps to lambda 1, where extra punctures are killed by epsilon 1. The bottom part is mapped to lambda 2, where extra punctures are killed by epsilon 2. And on the other side, you go to the base point. So nothing needs to be done. And for the gradient trajectory, just lands in U, and there is nothing that needs to be done. And so to see, you associate this asymptotic condition, you count objects like this, and what objects like this will give you is basically a map that in cohomology goes up, a map that goes from the complex corresponding to this type of generators, which is this guy, from family homology for lambda 2, to generators here, which correspond to elements in this complex. So exactly these, this family homology here. And so that's how you get this this correspondence at the level of morphisms. And once you understand this, it is sufficient to add more punctures on the boundary to get the correspondence at the level of higher operations and to turn this functor at the level of morphisms into an infinity functor that transports all the algebraic structures from the augmentation category into the algebraic structure in the derived category of sheaves. And the nice thing is that it's clear from the construction that here you can add as many punctures as you would like. So the higher operations at the level of augmentations can take as many arguments as you'd like. That's an infinity category. But on the other hand, when you spit out something, which is spitting out a map that goes up like this, the only type of breaking that can occur is that when two things split vertically like this, which means that you have either the composition of two maps, which is the algebra multiplication on the DG category side, or if you split and have no puncture on one side, you get the boundary operator in this category of sheaves. And so you only get two types of higher operations at the level of sheaves, which is multiplication and differential. And so it's plain from this construction that it's quite adapted to go from an infinity category to a DG category. And so that's what we are writing down currently to explain this correspondence between the holomorphic world and the sheaves for Legendre manifolds. Thank you.